My name is Malin Creighton, and I can tell you the exact moment my family taught me what I was worth to them. It wasn't the years of quiet dismissals or the snide little jokes, they were just background noise. No, the real break happened the night Aunt Clarissa looked me straight in the eye, smirked, and said in front of everyone, "Malin, sweetheart, some people are born important, and some people are just born extra." The table laughed. I didn't. Because in that moment, something in me cracked open a wound deep enough to reshape everything that came after. That was the night I stopped letting them decide who I was. I reached the resort just as the last trace of daylight slipped behind the mountains, leaving Lake Tahoe in a cold, dishty, blue hush that seemed to seep straight through the glass of my car. The lodge stood glowing beneath strings of warm lights, dressed up the way families do when they want to pretend everything about them shines. Inside, the atmosphere hit me instantly. Laughter carried too loudly, the kind that tries to convince itself it belongs. A few relatives pulled me into quick side hugs before drifting off, satisfied they had done their duty. Then came the familiar once-over, the silent measurement of how well I fit into their unspoken hierarchy. As always, I landed somewhere near the bottom, harmless, predictable, not worth lingering on. When I stepped fully into the main hall, my path crossed with Amanda Pierce. She looked polished in a way only certain women can manage, every curl in place, pearls catching just enough light to make a point. Her smile flickered in that practiced way, warm on the surface but cool underneath. She let her gaze move over me, as if checking a box, already certain she knew exactly what category to put me in. Standing beside her was Rowan, broad-shouldered, steady posture, the unmistakable air of someone trained to sweep a room with one glance and catalog everything that didn't fit. He offered a polite nod before returning to the perimeter of the crowd, keeping watch without ever looking like he was. The evening unfolded in waves of chatter and clinking glasses, plates piled high with roast beef, steam from mulled cider drifting through the air, conversations about fluctuating stock prices and second homes in Scottsdale. I stayed on the sidelines, blending in the way I always did, letting others fill the space with stories of promotions, investments, or vacations they believed made them interesting. At one point, while exchanging pleasantries with a distant cousin, I noticed Rowan pause mid-sip, his eyes narrowed just slightly, the way someone reacts to a sound they recognize but can't immediately place. It lasted no more than a heartbeat, yet it pulled a faint thread of tension through the room, subtle but unmistakable. As the noise swelled again, I drifted toward the window. Outside, the lake lay wrapped in a thin veil of mist, the kind that makes everything appear softer than it truly is. But beneath that quiet surface, I felt an unsettling shift in the air, a promise that tonight would not behave the way nights like this usually did. Amanda waited until I found my seat before settling beside me, her expression already shaped like she knew exactly what box to place me in. She asked about my work with that polite, pointed curiosity that never truly seeks an answer. I told her I handled federal administration tied to transportation and logistics, keeping my tone even. She barely let the words land before offering her verdict, calling it paperwork, the kind of job perfect for a woman who didn't want anything too demanding. Her smile stretched with a sweetness meant to soften the blow. But the sting was deliberate. A few people around us let out those small, muted laughs, the ones that pretend to be harmless but aren't. I lifted my water glass, letting the cool edge press against my fingers while I steadied my breath. On the outside, I kept my expression calm. Inside, a familiar pressure tightened in my chest, the echo of years spent being politely diminished, folded into a smaller shape so I would fit the version of myself others preferred. Across the table, Rowan looked over again, not in amusement, not in sympathy. His gaze was analytical, sharp, almost clinical, the kind of look someone gives a detail that doesn't quite match the rest of the picture. His eyes didn't flinch when the conversation shifted. They stayed on me a beat too long. A faint vibration from my bag jolted me back into my body. I knew that signal instantly. Wrong time, wrong room. I silenced it quickly, hoping no one noticed the flicker of tension in my eyes. Amanda continued her monologue, effortlessly pulling the spotlight back to her son's training, the elite nature of his work, the missions he wasn't supposed to discuss, but somehow she narrated anyway. I listened silently, letting her words drift past like a draft through an open window. Soon enough, she looped her arm through mine and walked me around the room, showing me off the way someone might present a safe, predictable example of adulthood, a case study in unremarkable living. I matched her steps, matched her smile, and buried every retort that pressed against my tongue. By the time she released me, my arm felt lighter, but the bruise beneath her words lingered. Later in the evening, a conversation sparked at the far end of the table about political tensions overseas. Someone mentioned conflict spreading through parts of Africa, attributing it to poor communication and unpredictable alliances. I wasn't planning to contribute, but instinct took over. I said the supply routes there had been tightened because ISR operations were increasing. The moment the acronym left my mouth, a brief silence followed, thin but noticeable. Amanda brushed it aside immediately, eager to keep control of the narrative. "Something electronic," she said, waving her hand as if explaining away a child's misstep. She insisted I probably skimmed the term somewhere online. Her tone tried to nudge me back into the corner she'd assigned me earlier, but Rowan didn't look away. He turned fully toward me, posture rigid, eyes locked on mine with unsettling precision. It was the stare of someone sorting through memory, matching sound with context, searching for where exactly he'd heard what shouldn't be familiar. I tried to shift the conversation back to safer topics, but he kept watching. He wasn't listening to the table anymore. He was listening to me. A few minutes later, someone joked about the resort playlist, and I let out a small laugh. Rowan froze. The reaction was instant, reflexive, almost visceral. His expression wiped blank, as if something in my voice hit a place he didn't want to revisit. He recovered quickly, but the damage was done. The air around us felt heavier, my skin prickling with an awareness I couldn't shake. I stepped back from the table, gravitating toward the dessert station. From there, the room looked distorted in the reflection of the window, bright, warm, full of chatter. But outside, the lake was darkening under layers of fog, drawing the night in closer. And for the first time that evening, I sensed something shifting, a boundary thinning, a truth pressing dangerously close to the surface. The main course arrived just as the room settled into that warm, buzzing glow people mistake for comfort. From where I sat, though, the soft violin and clinking glasses only made the long white table feel more like a witness stand. Amanda lifted her glass again, clearly enjoying how every conversation paused for her. And when she turned toward me, her smile thinned into something sharp enough to draw blood. She announced to half the room that I was still doing that little desk job. Wasn't I? Chairs shifted, faces turned. The hush that followed was wrapped in polite discomfort, a silence that shrank me down to exactly the size she wanted. I answered steadily, naming the federal field I worked in just enough truth to get by, but not enough to reveal anything real. Amanda laughed loud and clear, offering the theory that I must be excellent at photocopying. Her delight at the scattered snickers around us was unmistakable. Heat climbed up my throat, but I kept my expression still. Rowan, 3 seats away, watched me with that same assessing stare I'd felt earlier, cool, focused, unsettling. He looked at me the way someone listens for a faint signal in static, searching for a pattern no one else notices. Amanda continued, praising her son's bravery while hinting that my days probably involved nothing more dangerous than a swivel chair. The entire table waited for me to defend myself or fold. I chose silence, not because she was right, but because it was the safest option left. Then a relative asked Rowan about a classified mission. He declined smoothly, but when I lifted my glass, he watched again, longer this time. Sharper. Amanda mistook his attention for indulgence and assured him I couldn't possibly understand his world. Someone asked where I lived in D.C. I answered without thinking, naming an area far too close to secured administrative zones. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt the shift. Rowan's expression changed, not curiosity, not confusion, but recognition. Suddenly, the room felt too bright, and every laugh cut sharper than the last. The layer I'd worn all evening had begun to tear. Dinner had barely moved into the next course when Amanda tapped her spoon against her glass, commanding attention with tipsy confidence, calling my name loudly. She asked the room how exactly my work changed the world. The question wasn't a question, it was a blade pressed flat against my dignity. I answered evenly, explaining only that my role supported national decisions, which earned a few soft chuckles. Amanda's laugh burst across the table, suggesting I probably photocopied strategies for the country. I didn't rise to the bait, and my silence emboldened her. She pressed harder, demanding to know what I actually did besides sign forms and send emails. I felt the tension coil in my spine. If I spoke, I risked slipping. If I didn't, she'd keep carving away until nothing was left. Rowan sat forward, eyes locked on me with the concentration of someone tuning a radio channel in the dark. That alone made my pulse stumble. Then came the moment I couldn't take back. A relative asked Rowan if soldiers in special operations ever overrode orders. Before he could open his mouth, my instincts fired. I answered with the cadence I'd spent years trying to bury, stating that critical decisions belong to the tactical command level, because people on the ground never see the whole map. The second I heard myself, I felt the air seize. Rowan froze, stunned, the last piece of recognition sliding into place behind his eyes. No one else noticed. But he and I knew that sentence didn't belong to an ordinary life. Amanda scoffed, asking who in the room would ever believe I mattered. Faces nodded along, but Rowan kept staring at me silent, unmoving like someone hearing a ghost speak. And I felt the dividing line between my two lives begin to crack. The table had drifted into that uneasy middle ground between half-drunken amusement and sharpened curiosity. The violin played on, but the laughter had thinned, leaving behind the kind of pause that makes you feel everyone is waiting for a spark. When Amanda stood again, lifting her fourth glass of Chardonnay, I felt the room pivot. Trouble always announces itself early, you just need to know the signs. She pointed straight at me. Her smile stretched with the confidence of someone convinced the crowd would cheer her on. She said I could talk all I wanted tonight, but we all knew the truth. I worked a small, unimportant job. Her eyes had a hard shine to them, a dare wrapped in condescension. Then she demanded I answer loud enough for the whole table. Forks lowered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Faces turned with that familiar American family curiosity, eager for spectacle. Too polite to admit it, for a moment, sitting there in that luxury resort. I felt like I'd been dragged in front of a camera crew, the room waiting for my confession. No one spoke up. Their silence was its own kind of cruelty. Amanda tapped her glass again, telling me to explain what my job involved besides shuffling papers. A burn ran down my spine, not anger, but a clarity that comes when you realize you're at the end of pretending. I steadied myself and told her calmly I didn't do paperwork. She burst into laughter before I even finished speaking, waving me off as if I were a child who couldn't tell the truth. Rowan shifted. Not much, but enough. The way his attention locked on me made my breath catch. This wasn't idle interest. It was recognition searching for a place to land. Amanda leaned in, insisting I admit I was just an office girl so the table could move on. Something inside me snapped taut. I set my glass down, the sound cracking through the noise like a warning shot. For the first time, I let my eyes meet hers fully. I told her she was asking the wrong question. The room dropped into a stunned hush. Amanda demanded to know what I meant, but before I could speak, Rowan's fingers curled around the back of his chair, knuckles white, eyes cutting through the distance like a blade. I knew that expression. I'd heard it through radio static years ago. Someone asked what I meant. Amanda laughed it off, but Rowan didn't blink. His entire posture tightened with the instinct of someone who had just identified something dangerous and familiar. There was no returning to the silence I'd lived in, so I crossed the line myself. I told them I didn't handle paper, I handled threats. For a single frozen moment, the entire room inhaled as one, and I felt the thin, fragile line separating my two lives finally snap. Amanda's laughter burst out so loudly it drew glances from neighboring tables. She claimed I'd watched too many action movies, slapping someone's shoulder as if I'd delivered the comedic high point of the evening. Her voice filled the room, warm and dismissive. the same way people laugh when they're certain they've won. But Rowan didn't laugh. He rose slowly, as though pulled from a deep, heavy place. His balance took a moment to settle, and when he turned toward me, everything about him went still. No twitch, no shift, no hint of expression, just focused recognition sharpening beneath the surface. He asked in a low, controlled voice if I'd really said what he thought he heard. I nodded, and he took one measured step back, eyes widening with a realization that read more like fear than surprise. The violin faded into a distant hum. My pulse was the only sound I could hear. Amanda tried to pull him out of it, telling him not to let me get inside his head, insisting people like me exaggerate. He ignored her completely. He kept staring at me with the intensity of someone reliving a moment they had fought to forget. Then he said he'd heard those exact words before. In Helmand. My breath caught. His face shifted, memory colliding with reality. Amanda waved him off again, insisting he was being dramatic. But Rowan's hand trembled, barely noticeable. But there, and that single tremor said everything. Amanda turned on me, demanding to know my title if I was so significant. Her voice cracked from the force of her own certainty. The entire room waited, expecting me to crumble. Instead, I lifted my eyes, inhaled once, and stepped fully into the truth I'd run from all night. I told them I was Cipher 9. Cold air swept in from the open door. Rowan froze completely, staring as if watching a ghost walk into the room. His lips parted, a whisper slipping out confirmation. Disbelief, horror intertwined. Amanda's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And the entire world inside that warm, glittering resort shifted on its axis. The moment the words left my mouth, the room seemed to dim. Though every light still burned, it was the way people stared, fixed, unblinking, as if I'd just armed something dangerous at the center of the table. Amanda froze, her wine glass tilting until a thin ribbon spilled across the linen, unnoticed by her. Rowan didn't look away. He stood caught between the family who raised him and the battlefield that shaped him. His shoulders trembled once. Seals don't tremble. That was when I knew he'd recognized me completely. He turned to the table, voice roughened by something deeper than shock. Cipher 9 isn't a story, he said. She's the voice from above, the one every SEAL team listens to, the one we don't question. Silence swallowed the room. Someone asked if that meant I commanded them. Rowan didn't look at the speaker. He kept his eyes on me. When she says abort, we stop. No debate. Not even command can override it. The weight of his words landed like a blow no one there was prepared for. Amanda lurched to her feet, insisting he was mistaken, but Rowan's hand slammed against the table hard enough to rattle silverware. He warned her sharply to stop. She had no idea who she was speaking to. Her face blanched. My family stared at their plates. Finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd spent the night belittling, Rowan looked back at me, voice softening in a way that cut deeper than any shout. In Helmand, your voice saved our lives. Without you, we wouldn't be here. A wave of emotion rippled through the room, but I stayed still. No pride, no denial, only composure, the kind Cipher 9 was built from, the kind no one at that table had ever imagined. I stepped out onto the balcony and let the door close behind me, sealing off the noise like a radio channel finally going silent. The wind off Lake Tahoe cut sharp and cold, dragging the scent of pine across the water. The lake stretched out in darkness, the moon tracing a thin blade of silver along its surface. A moment later, Rowan joined me. He didn't speak at first, just set a beer beside me and opened his own. When he finally asked if I knew when he recognized me, I guessed it was sometime tonight. He shook his head. It was the moment I told Amanda she was asking the wrong question. He'd heard those exact words through static years ago, calm, clipped, right before his team approached a house wired with an IED. The memory struck hard. I remembered the storm, the blinded drone feeds, the weight of responsibility as I told them to stop. 6 seconds later, the blast confirmed everything. Rowan stared at the lake while he spoke. My voice had saved them. Without it, he wouldn't be standing here. I told him he owed me nothing. He said his whole team owed me their lives. The wind hit us again, colder this time. But something in me settled. For the first time, I saw my family clearly. They'd never known me, and maybe never would. Rowan glanced over and said they had no right to judge me. And for once, I didn't argue. When I stepped back into the dining room, my name, Cipher 9, still hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Amanda kept her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. My family stayed frozen, the silence so complete it felt rehearsed. I didn't lift a glass or offer a speech. I simply told them I no longer looked for my worth in places incapable of giving it. No one answered. No one apologized. And I realized I didn't need them to. I left the resort feeling lighter than I had in years. Tahoe dark as polished stone behind me, 6 months later, in the Fusion Cell briefing room. My new title reflected on the screen deputy director. My phone buzzed a foreign number. A picture of a beer. Rowan's message wishing me a happy birthday and promising the next drink was on him. I smiled not for recognition, but because someone finally saw me clearly. The story didn't end with an explosion, but with the quiet I'd earned.